Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, wherever you may be. Welcome to this webinar this morning here in Australia. I know we've got a lot of people joining, so I'll introduce Dr. Ben Lynch, who is founder of Seeking Health. He's author of the book Dirty Genes, and he has developed the Strategene genetic report, which we're here to talk about today. So that's very exciting. Welcome, Dr. Lynch.
Awesome to be here, Carolyn.
All right, so I know we've got a million questions. So what we're here to discuss today, and many of you have registered for this webinar over a year ago, but I know that Dr. Lynch is an absolute fastidious, he's very fastidious about getting everything right. And he kept saying, unless it was right, we're not going to launch it. So we now have it right, which is really exciting. And we're going to share some of the new features with you. But just so you all understand, so we don't get 50 million questions. So anyone who is currently within the US, except for New York, you buy the cook kit. You buy the full kit, which you get off the website. And Neve is going to be putting the links in for you. If you are in New York or outside the US, anywhere in the world, and is that right, Ben? Anywhere in the world, you can upload your existing 23andMe and Ancestry DNA data to the website to get the report. Okay, so we'll be showing you. I actually did it last night. It's an incredibly easy, simple process. It steps you through step by step. So that was and you literally get your report within minutes of uploading your data. All right, so let's have a bit of a talk, Ben, about, what, in terms of, what do you think? I mean, I looked at it last night and I thought, wow, the features are actually great. I love the ability to jump from pathway to information about the SNPs to then the summary at the end. So perhaps we could just start by showing people how it actually works and why you have updated this whole process, why you think this is such a good report to be doing.
Yeah. So anytime you are doing something that is, kind of, I would say tide turning and innovative, you launch something in the beginning where you think is great. So the first strategy that we ever did was at the time great. It was informing people that, look, we need to look at SNPs and genes as a community, as a group, rather than looking at these long Excel sheets of different variants, of homo, hetero, or wild type, because you don't really know what that means. And if you see red, you immediately think bad, you immediately think slow, but those variants may mean nothing at all. And what's it put in context with another gene? So let's say you did that Excel sheet and you see that MTHFR was red, homozygous 677, you're like, oh my gosh, you started giving methylfolate, but you didn't know the MTR, you didn't know the MAT, you didn't know the CBS, and you didn't know that cofactors were here in the epigenetic control points. So we put all that in. And Carolyn, with the new one, the biggest improvements for the new strategy, well, there's many. One is we remove the color of red and yellow and green, because that brings a mindset of fear or I'm fine, or I'm okay, but not quite fine. So we switched all the colors out, and because ultimately what you need to know about a genetic variation is what's its impact upon the gene. What's the effect? And typically the effect of a genetic variation is nothing. Most genetic variations do nothing at all to the genetic function. So we scoured for years, looking at functional variants, meaning variations in the genes which have researched effect on that gene, whether it's the binding of the cofactors is slower, or faster. Maybe the substrate is issue. Maybe it doesn't transcribe very quickly. Maybe it doesn't turn off. So in the new Strategene, we inform you the speed, like the old one we did, but we also have this new speedometer, which we'll show you, which is really, really cool. It gives you a quick glance. We have things in there now. We have full recommendations and cautions of food, lifestyle, environment, and supplement medication sections. So there's a wealth of information in terms of how these particular genes get dirtied and cleaned. And there's a lot more genes that are now tested and included in the report. So for example, the biopterin pathway in the old Strategene was the dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, biopterin, everything all in one. Now we have 3 separate pathways with a heap more genes on there, and it's way more informative. So if you're doing any type of neurotransmission, stress, anxiety, depression, Parkinson's, anything neurological, this is a game changer. Insomnia, ADD, lack of focus, irritability, bipolar, it's going to give you a ton of resources to be able to walk yourself and your client or patient through it.
Yeah, good. And do you want to show it, or should I bring it up on the screen? Because I think it's probably good to show everyone what it looks like.
Sure.
For some people, they will have had an old Strategene, so you may see the differences in that. I think from a practitioner's point of view, it's a really good, simple way to explain genetic susceptibility to patients, because I think many people are visual learners. So I think it's definitely easier, and then the client themselves can go in, as you just said, and look at what influences the gene, what might upregulate it, downregulate it. One of the questions, we had the vitamin D receptors on the vitamin D genes on the old report. Are they coming into the new report?
Say that one more time. Sorry, I was digging around for an old Strategene when you said that.
The vitamin, or do you want me to bring mine up?
I can bring up a test
Okay.
one, so you don't have to use your own personal one.
The vitamin D pathway that you had on the old one.
Yeah, so the vitamin D was never released officially. It was just given as, if someone downloaded a bundle of other pathways, but we never had any genetic variations with it. Actually, right now, as we speak, the team is working on the vitamin D pathway, which will be available as an add-on in the future. And so when you buy the Strategene DNA kit, the chip itself, which is not available internationally for all sorts of regulatory issues, but it's a massive chip. It's like 700,000 SNPs or something, and we custom built it. So we added a lot of SNPs on there, and we're actually building a new one. We're adding another 200-300 genetic variations on top of the 300 that we already added based upon our research. So that's in process now with Illumina. The vitamin D report is awesome because vitamin D is extremely complicated, and genetically and epigenetically, you need to know what's going on in both worlds.
Yeah.
And if we knew this going into COVID, oh my God, and the world was actually allowing us to talk about vitamin D, it'd be life-changing, literally.
Yeah.
But that won't be available for probably another couple more months.
And this is an ever ongoing process. Obviously, I mean, you'll be adding SNPs as you move forward.
Yes.
Yeah, which is good.
Yeah, we're adding SNPs as we move forward. We're adding new reports as we go forward. We want to work on a pregnancy planner. So if someone's struggling with pregnancy complications, this will be available to practitioners only. FDA will not allow us to be direct to consumer, which I think is kind of unfortunate because there's a lot of things people can do without a practitioner. But it'll be practitioner only, and then we're going to be working on things like for anxiety report or insomnia reports and just dialing in, because I know that look, when you're going to see this new strategy and you're going to look at it and you're like, oh my God, this is still overwhelming. Yes, it is. But the creativity that you have as a health professional is not removed. And medicine is an art form, and you cannot. I keep having Ben Greenfield emailing me. He's like, "Can you give a 1 to 2 page summary of people's strategy report?" It's like, I mean, I'll try, but really, I need to know the existing history.
That's right.
So you look, when you order Strategene, it's not just a genetic test. It's literally a map to your patient. It's a map. So our marketing for it is actually sucks, because it's not a genetic test where you find out what % of Italian you are or Australian or what have you. But it's more of a map. So I'm going to show you now. I'm going to share my screen. That's the wrong button. So I'll just do this. I'm going to share my old desktop.
Okay, we can see that.
Okay. So Carolyn was talking about the upload page, right? So when you get the link from her for, or you're uploading your clients, your patients, your own, this is what the upload page looks like. So you make the purchase, you use the same email that you have, use the purchase, you load it in here, then the database looks for your email from the purchase, it verifies it, and then you load it in. These are non-blurry. When you verify it, you move to the next step. But it is very simple. It's very fast.
It is.
Yeah. So
it takes less than 2 minutes to do it.
Yeah. So let's say you uploaded an Ancestry. You bought Ancestry, okay? And so this is what you would get, and this is the PDF, and the page numbers. We have 127 pages. So that is another change. So you're like, oh my God, you expect me to go through 127 pages with my patients when they get their strategy results back? No. So let me preface how you work with Strategene for a second. So I stopped sharing for a moment. So you do everything that you do without genetics testing in front of you. You do history, you do physical exams, you have your intake questionnaires, you look at labs, you do all that. Only then do you bring in Strategene. I do not care if your client comes up to you and say, hey, Jack, or Dr. Smith, I got my new Strategene. Can you please review it? Yeah, that's great. I'm excited you did that. But Sally, let's put that to the side for a moment. Let's do your history labs and figure out what the goal is for today's visit. And then we'll revisit your Strategene with that goal in mind. And then we'll see how we can use Strategene to make a strategic plan for you, so we know with more certainty, not complete certainty, but more certainty of what things we should recommend for you and which ones, maybe even more importantly, should we not recommend for you. So Carolyn, do you have anything to add to that statement? Because it's incredibly important.
Yes, and I mean, I've always said that your genetic susceptibility is incredibly important, but if you don't know your health history, your family's history, what bloods are happening right now, what's going on with your gut, what's going on in the organic acids, you're not really getting a picture of the here and now. And we can, just by getting a history from someone, get an indication of which pathways may be deficient. But where the genetic report is the icing on the cake is that when you started your protocols, and you may not be, say, from a neurological point of view, getting the breakthrough that you need, but then you can see that susceptibility and you can go, aha, so your problem isn't serotonin at all, it's dopamine. So we're going to really focus our approach on dopamine, but it is completely useless unless you do a thorough patient history on every level. And then you look at the here and now, which is the bloods, the organic acids, the gut, whatever else it may be.
And if you do that, the results that you get with your clients and your patients is staggering.
Yeah.
And you leave, how many times have you worked with a client or a patient and you're like, God, I think 5-HTP will help them. or I think tyrosine will help them, but I'm nervous because I gave it to so-and-so and they really reacted poorly. But I gave it to like 20 of my other patients. They did so well, but I'm really wondering if I'm going to make this one terrible too. Now you can just pull up Strategene, look at the pathway and say, okay, all right, yeah, you can be put on 5-HTP. I'm pretty confident about this. Look out for these signs, because of this and this and this. But overall, it looks like you need it. Or, boy, I'm glad you brought me your Strategene. We got to be really careful with 5-HTP with
Yeah, exactly. I had a patient not long ago, a young girl who had a psychotic episode, and she was put on an SSRI and started to go downhill really fast. And I looked at her genetic report and I said to her mother, an SSRI is not the way to go. This is going to make her worse, because she had a very slow MAO and slow serotonin clearance. So they refused. The psychiatrist refused to change the medication, and she continued to go downhill for at least 6 months until the mother absolutely went off, and then changed it to a non-MAO, something that does not affect MAO, and she improved significantly, and she's now back at school. So that it can just be the real, I liken it to a jigsaw puzzle. The genetic susceptibility can very much help you which pieces you put in place first. What do you do? Obviously, you've got to deal with gut and everything else, but in terms of the long-term health, it gives you a really clear direction.
Yeah. And so again, Strategene is a genetic test, but it is more of it's a clinical tool. It's a guide for you and your patient.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to simplify it and say patient. I know some of you don't see patients, but have clients instead. But I'm just going to keep it simple. So, I'm going to show it to you now. And so keep in mind that when you use Strategene, this is post intake. This is post them filling out the forms. This is post you knowing their current goal for this specific patient visit. So if you are not doing specific goals for the existing visit, I highly recommend that you do that and change that. Because if you don't ask your patient what the goal of today's visit is, and you do not accomplish that goal because you're making an assumption, then you're going to lose them as a client, as a patient. They're not going to like, oh, they didn't help me, and they're going to leave. So you just simply ask, you don't assume, what's your primary goal for today? What's your goal for 3 months from now? What's your goal for a year from now? And then you work together on those goals, and you go step by step. But if you have an immediate goal, then you use Strategene to help them accomplish that goal and help guide you to making the proper recommendations so you don't screw it up. And so you can actually hit it and it helps them accomplish it. And then your patient visits go up, the returns, the recommendations, referrals, and so on. It's a key part of practice. So you can use two types of raw data. You can use Ancestry, or you can use 23andMe. I still prefer 23andMe. Excuse me. Oh, whoops. I still prefer Ancestry over 23andMe. So if you have not yet recommended a genetic test for your patient to do, recommend Ancestry if it's available. Because what happens is you get more raw data out of it. And so let me see what that is here. So scroll down. So Ancestry, see Ancestry here, version 2, recommended. Okay, because right now you have version 5, and who knows when 23andMe is going to come out with version 6, and you don't know when Ancestry is going to change it either. But this column is Ancestry, and the last column is V5. So let's just scroll down, and there's a alignment here. So you have 75% of the SNPs tested for with the upload report, whereas you have 64% if you use 23andMe. And if you buy the chip directly from Strategene, which unfortunately internationals can't, New Yorkers can't either, you get 100%. That is if the variant is called. So you're getting another 11% of variations reported on the report if you're using Ancestry. That's a key point. Okay, so this individual used Ancestry, and I really want you sitting down with your customers and your patients and having them read this before they do anything else. Okay, there's no such thing as a bad, good, or a good report, just unique. So, and you got to have them click this on their own time as well, and you need to do it also. But they click this, and this is a really good guide to teach you how to read the report. Okay, so this just goes and it gives you insight. And I will tell you now, if you don't read this, you will be lost. Okay, but if you read it, you won't be. Now, this is a PDF, obviously, so you can come up here and you can search. So if, let's say that you're wondering about, well, 5-HTP. So you can type that and it will show you on the left where 5-HTP is mentioned in the report, and you can move through it. So that is one cool thing to do. And you can type in a lot of things for that. But I will tell you now, since we have the FDA here in the United States, we do not use disease names. So you can't type in rheumatoid arthritis. You can't type in miscarriage. You can't type in, bipolar or schizophrenia, because we remove those, because if the FDA saw that, it'd be all over our butt and pull it from the marketplace. If you're currently using genetic reports that have that, and they're not FDA approved, they're really running the risk of being shut down. So here is a footer on every single page. This is your friend. You use this a lot. And
that's
again,
that's the best feature. It's fantastic to be able to jump around to that.
It's so handy. And so when you're doing your patient history and you're looking at the intake form, or you've read Dirty Genes and you like using the quizzes from the book to help direct your intake, you're going to be evaluating your patient and figure out what pathways might be problematic in them. So maybe they have asthma, or seasonal allergies are bad and they stare at the ceiling and they're crazy irritable, and you think, okay, that sounds like histamine issues to me. And so we're going to look at histamine. So you kind of have this thing in your head. So by the time you pull open their Strategene, you're just going to look at the histamine report, the pathway, and then you look at other parts that associated with it. Or maybe they're pregnancy things, and you're hearing all these things about pregnancy, and homocysteine is elevated, and they're taking folic acid, and they're not getting pregnant, and their serum folates are really high, but that doesn't make sense because they're not even supplementing folic acid. So that, say, okay, I'm going to look at the folate pathway and maybe the methylation cycle. So your history is going to direct you where you're going to look in the report. So you click on these and it takes you to the section. So here's the histamine pathway. And when you first look at this, you're like, whoa, okay. And you got to look at the key. So again, if you click that, I'm going to use the footer again. I don't think we have a home page, which we should. But if you need to read this, okay, read the how to understand your genetic report. So I'm going to go back to the, I'm going to use the Super 7 actually. So the Super 7 pathway is based upon the book Dirty Genes. And I do this because these genes are really, really important, and they communicate with each other. And if you get a quick look at how your patient's genes, dirty genes, are genetically and a bit epigenetically. So genetically, this is the speed bar, and these are the epigenetics. The influence is how the genes function. So these are the things which slow the gene down, or the enzyme more appropriately, and these are the things that speed up its function. And if you look at this, the key here, so a blue circle means that it was checked. If there's no blue circle around it, like MTR, okay, there's no genetic variations in ancestry that allow us to report MTR for you. So we can't test it because they have no raw data for it. With our own chip, there is, but Ancestry does not have it. So MTHFR, there's a speed bar here, slow. So we don't report if it's heterozygous, homozygous, or wild type, because that doesn't really matter, and you have to memorize everything. Albert Einstein was brilliant. He said, never memorize anything you can look up. So ultimately, you want to know, what's the SNPs effect on my patient? Well, it's slow. For the most part, these are all slow. So your patient has slow PMT, so their phosphatidylcholine production is a bit slower. Notice I didn't say compromised. It's a bit slower. COMT slower, DAO slow, all slow. Now, what's this mean? GST, this hashed, it's complicated. Does that mean it's hard to figure out? No. If you click it, watch this. So I'm hovering over it and it changes to a hand. So you click that. And so this variant shows a 50% decrease in its expression. So we tell you so this blue box is your patient. This white stuff is static. So this stuff stays the same for every single report. It's this blue box is what changes for every person that you're seeing in your clinic. So this particular variant shows a 50% decrease in expression. So that is pretty significant. So the glutathione transferase here is 50% decrease. And, so you just keep scrolling down and you learn more about it. And then there's a GSTO gene. So this one is a bit faster. This one has a 120% higher activity. See, look at this. This is wild type. So is my screen big enough for you, Caroline?
Yeah. If you made it full screen, I think that would be better if you can.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, lovely.
Okay. So this GSTO gene, so this glutathione transferase, this tells you what the gene is. Okay. So it helps process these things and also helps support arsenic. And see here, GSTO possesses twice the antioxidant activity of GSTO1. See, I didn't even know that. So I'm still, you're right, all this stuff. That's why I have a team too. It's just so much. But look, this is wild type. Okay. So even though it's wild type, you think, okay, my patient doesn't have any problem, but still we give you an effect. What does that mean? So knowing that they have a higher activity compared to minor variant, that's important. And then here we have an 80% higher activity. So that's useful information. If you just had, minus on an old report or it was colored green, you wouldn't know that it's actually beneficial to have a wild type, like very beneficial, right? So, and this one here, plus, and this one is investigational. So this is a genetic variant on a genetic test that it was, maybe run somewhere else if they tested this variant. I don't know if they do or not, but if you see that it's homozygous, you'd immediately think this is bad, right? But it's not, because it has higher expression and appears more beneficial. But the research is low. So we include what we call investigational SNPs if the research is good, but it's not really confirmatory. This type of research is solid. It's been replicated. It's been done multiple times. This particular variant hasn't really done it enough yet, but it's looking pretty good. So clinically, as a tool, we provide it, but we just give you this little thing here. Be mindful that this is investigational. So overall, this individual has pretty good glutathione transferase, and it's complicated because these are all faster, and this one is slower. If you go back to this Super 7, see GST, it's just one. We don't show you GST 01 or GST 02. We just put them as a family. Makes sense?
Mm.
Okay. So because otherwise this pathway would get very complicated. We would show you GST 01, GST 02, GST 03. I mean, there's a whole bunch.
Yeah.
So just make it as a family and just go through the report. So let's, what gene do you want me to click on, Carolyn?
Let's go to COMT. That's a good one that most people understand.
Yeah. Okay. So before we do that, let's look at where COMT lives. COMT lives in the dopamine. So this is just a really simplified pathway, but it gives you a quick, dirty look at your patient. Dopamine pathway is brand new.
Yeah, I like it. I like the way that you've got the minor and the major as well. And particularly when you're looking at organic acids test, I think this is really helpful for pracies to understand the HVA versus the VMA, because that on the older report was a little bit harder to really understand the differences between COMT, MAO, and DOPAC, for example. So I think, yeah, I like the way that this is laid out. I think it makes it much easier.
It's way easier, and I mean, at first glance, you look at it, it's more complicated because there's more information, but having the more information makes it more effective. And you're right. I mean, how many times do you run organic acid on a patient and it's low, and then they say, oh, there's low HVA, homophenolic acid, so their dopamine is low. Well, look,
Yes,
it's
e-
stuck, right?
exactly, exactly.
It's
And
stuck.
and if they've got a slow MAO and a slow COMT, it's really easy to see how that's low.
Yeah, so if you just run organic acids and you get it back and you see low VMA and you gave tyrosine to this patient back in the day and thinking you're going to support their dopamine, and they got back and they're like, oh my God, my anxiety's through the roof. I'm so irritable. I'm having fights with everybody. I just can't fall asleep. What the hell's going on? And you'd be confused. It's like, I don't get it. You have low
Mm,
HbA.
yeah.
But now you get the strategy report and you're like, oh crap! I wish we knew about that earlier. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like the dopamine pathway. It's really good. So
Yeah,
let's just, can you click on COMT? Because
yeah,
I just want to explain a little bit more. So on the right-hand side, and I guess this is the major change for me, is that you've got the 4680, the V158M, and you can see there that the variant for this person is the GG.
mm,
I I really like, I guess I will look at COMT as one of the major SNPs that I'm evaluating, because I want to see what's their genetic susceptibility, but we know that dopamine beta hydroxylase is inhibited environmentally by yeast and mold and clostridia and other things. So what I think we can do is we can say, right, on the right hand side in the blue, this is your polymorphism. On the left, you can see it says your environment. So what you're looking at there, so the top part is your explanation of the gene. The dirties is what environmentally affects this particular enzyme. And so you can see that, you've got there, oh, you
and
went
then
too,
lifestyle and food. I'll
yeah,
scroll back in and use
yeah,
environment. Yeah,
yeah. So you can set, sleep environment is one. Um, I liked that one, clutter and disorganization. But I guess at the end of the day, if you are a COMT plus plus, you're going to be super, super organized person. If you're a COMT minus minus, you're probably going to be not so. And yet it is the clutter and disorganization of a COMT plus plus that will make them way more stressed than it will a COMT minus minus. So understanding where your susceptibility lies, I think, is really good to be able to look at what potentially dirties it. So I wouldn't
sure.
think, and stress is obviously a huge one, because your methyls are eaten up more in stress than anything else. So COMT, being a methyltransferase, has to have SAMe as its cofactor, along with magnesium. So we can then see, if you go down to the food, I think that's also really interesting. Caffeine obviously is going to slow it down. So you need to take into consideration, well, where do I lie? Am I slow or am I fast? Because for some people are slow, a caffeine drink a day can actually be very calming and very relaxing. So it's understanding where your susceptibility lies, and then looking at the food, lifestyle, and environment, and how that might influence that particular gene that you've got.
Yeah, and then if you're working with, say, um, the woman of the family, and she's married, and her partner, they've been fighting and they're thinking about a divorce, and you're like, okay, you know what, it sounds like you guys are just too opposite, and so let's just throw a you know throw you both out on a limb here and do genetic testing and look at these things, and what if they were, what if the woman was totally organized and a slow comp haplotype, and the man was a fast comp haplotype, and just them knowing that that they are wired a certain way, that it's not giving them an excuse to be that, but it's knowing that they are more susceptible towards being a slob, or more susceptible to being, you know, freaking out and being super, super clean and organized.
Yeah.
So it gives an understanding. Oh, okay, honey, I see that's how you're wired. I'm going to make more of an effort, and I'm going to make more of an effort to chill out and you know, all these things, but let's meet somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree. And sometimes opposites do attract, but when you get to those finite little details, those picky things, it can make all the difference.
Yeah, it's a big one. And this is also a huge thing with Strategene too, is the haplotype. So if you look at the call here, so the variant allele, which, you know, you might be thinking as bad, you know, meaning because it's different than the wild type, the call is typical. So both of these variations are wild type. And so you're thinking, well, how is this slow? Because it's not homozygous, it's actually wild type, it's minus. But the research looks, if you have in these two locations, if you look at these two locations, at the 98th location and the 158th location on this gene that maybe is 1,000 bases long. So at the 98th location, there might be a switch from adenosine to guanosine, there might be a valine to methionine. But in this situation, there wasn't, yet they have potentially higher, they have slower COMT. So you would miss this on a different genetic report because you would just say, oh, it's minus, and minus. They're fine, and you move on to the next one. That is a big miss. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then do you want to just show the advanced tables summary? Because I think that's helpful for prackies looking up specific.
Yeah. So I'll do that in 1 second. So
Okay.
So say you're looking at the COMT gene with your patient, and you're describing what it does, and these are all the things that it does. So this is a consistent trend throughout the entire report. We give you the abbreviation, we write out the gene, it expresses an enzyme which does something, and it gives you cofactors right away as well. And then we give you the functions of what it does, and then we give you some other things as well. So this is really important here too. If COMT is functioning more slowly, there's more potential for neurotoxic compound dopamine quinone to form. This is a major cause in terms of research for Parkinson's, so in probably Alzheimer's as well. And if COMT and MAOA are both slow, then there's more potential for neurotoxic adrenochrome to form. So, you know, and then faster. So you see how we're not just talking about the SNP, but we're talking about the SNP in relation to a potential problem. And we're also talking about it in terms of other genes that work together. So over here, we talk about how caffeine may increase cardiovascular risk for a COMT slow individual, especially if combined with adenosine receptors issues, or adenosine metabolizing, or dopamine receptors, or caffeine metabolism. And we actually have all of these tested in Strategene, so you can look at that.
And the supplements and medications, I think, are very good too.
Yes, yeah, and so, you know, here's the supplements and medications, things that you can use to support your patient. So it's you know, and here we talk about supporting a slow MAOA may also be supportive. So consider B2, right? So we're not just always talking about the gene in isolation, but we're bringing in other genes which are heavily associated almost directly. You know, like here too, you gotta really focus on all of them. So I'm gonna go back to the dopamine pathway. See how I did that? So I can click COMT, and I can just go back to the dopamine here. I can click dopamine here and go back to the pathway.
Yeah.
So this individual, so this is the metabolism of the dopamine right up here. And as Caroline said, here's the major. So you can see this word here, major. every word that is written on this pathway is important for you to see. So here's major, which means this is the primary route of dopamine metabolism, this direction. Close this. Okay, so this individual is not metabolizing dopamine very well here. It's not metabolizing dopamine here well either. This is a storage form of dopamine when it gets sulfated. And this is a minor route of dopamine elimination. So this individual gets dopamine stuck in their head. It doesn't eliminate. So their risk of making this dopamine quinone is quite high. Plus, they also can produce L-DOPA faster than typically, but also look at their dopamine transport. This is new for the new Strategene. So their ability to transport dopamine is faster. Their ability to bind it to receptors is more sensitive, and their ability to reuptake it to pull the dopamine out of the brain is typical speed. So in this individual, they have a faster ability to make dopamine, slower ability to eliminate it, heightened ability to transport it to a more sensitive receptor. So do you think this person is type A? I'd put a lot of money on that.
Yeah.
So, and right here, we talk about it as well. So, so that is a very cool feature, and we do that for most neurotransmitters here as well. So I'm going to go back to the advanced tables. So advanced tables is a quick look. So the old Strategene and most genetic reports actually just give you a table like this, but what they're not providing you is the impact in terms of the speed. And I don't like giving you an impact in terms of the clinical problem or the clinical benefit, because that can change for your patient. If I said a slow COMT is associated with, so here it is right here, slow comp haplotype found slow. So if I just said that, type A driven, more prone to higher estrogen levels, PMS, et cetera, then you'd be focusing on that. But I want you to focus on the understanding that a slow comp has to do with the ability to metabolize dopamine. So you need to think about it versus just, little snippets that what fits in an Excel cell of, type A personality driven, irritable, PMS. That's not helpful. End of the day, what's the gene's job? What's the effect of the SNP on that particular gene? And how does it communicate with other genes? And so by having the speed of the impact versus the clinical effect, that's your job as a health professional to know that higher levels of dopamine can lead to certain situations. It can also be beneficial. It's also your job to know that, if we look at the serotonin pathway, what Caroline was talking about, like an SSRI, here's, serotonin reuptake transporter. Oh, where is it? A receptor transport. Yeah, here's the reuptake transporter. So this one, there was no
above. Look, the one above.
Yeah, so here's a serotonin transport, but I was looking for the reuptake.
Oh, okay, right.
So the SSRI, right?
Yeah.
So that SSRI inhibited this particular gene, which kept serotonin in in her patient's brain. But this individual, they have a reduced ability to make serotonin, but they also have a reduced ability to clear it. They have a heightened ability to transport it. And for some of their serotonin receptors, they have heightened ability to receive it and bind it. So they're more sensitive to serotonin. We also things which reduce the sensitivity to serotonin receptors. Maybe your patient is slow. You've looked at their 5-HIAA. It's actually elevated, but they're still depressed. Their COMT route is what you just saw, their dopamine route. So you want to try the 5-HTP, even though they're breaking it down really quickly. And but you got to keep them on it. But maybe their receptors are not working very well. So maybe they're still getting exposure to pesticides. And you say, look, are you getting exposure to pesticides? Because you can have all the serotonin in your brain, but if we don't remove the environmental exposure of pesticides, that's blocking the binding of serotonin to your brain, and we're not going to get anywhere. So that's where, again, Strategene becomes a guiding tool. It's like, look, you're on 200 milligrams of sustained release 5-HTP. We're metabolizing your serotonin. We see an elevated 5-HAI, whatever that is, 5
HIAA.
Yeah, it's too hard to say. But it's elevated in your organic acids. Let's keep you on it. We're still fighting fire here. You're still blue. But maybe we also need to slow down the chronic stressors if they're there. Maybe you've got infections, it's depleting your tryptophan, but I would be focusing on the receptors themselves and the transport.
Yeah, it's really good information to be able to deep dive into these, because we do so much work with anxiety and depression, and this is, I find, is very, very helpful.
Very much so. And then we also talk about, where are these certain things found? Like this particular gene tested, no SNP found. It's found in the periphery. This one's found in the brain. So, TPH2, they have a reduced ability to synthesize it. So they have reduced serotonergic transmission and reduced amygdala activation. And we go to the histamine pathway, which is really cool. I love this pathway. It's still really simple, but extremely effective. You don't see any genetic variation here. It was tested, but nothing found. But look, they're still struggling. Your patient still has seasonal allergies. They still have asthma problems. And you're like, well, I don't get it. This one is fine. But you say, okay, well, SAMI is the cofactor. You look at their homocysteine level because you did their labs, and their homocysteine is actually quite good. It's right where it needs to be. It's actually, right around 7 or 8. So, what's going on there? And like, oh, their MAO-A is slow. And according to organic acids, your riboflavin was deficient. So what's happening is your N-methylhistamine of your patient is feedback inhibiting HNMT, which is slowing down HNMT, which is then increasing the histamine. So if you did a genetic report and all you did was look at HNMT and you found that it was wild type and you did homocysteine and it was typical, it was actually healthy, or around 7 or 8 or so, well, methylation appears to be working. So, but your allergies are bad, your asthma is bad, your insomnia is bad. So let's open up and drain the N-methylhistamine by opening up and supporting your slow MAO-A. And look, we got to reduce your caffeine. You're not really smoking, which is good. Your acute high stress is pretty bad right now because of your allergies. And we don't have a SNP here in your ALDH, but we got to make sure your zinc and B3 is also good, because you're going to process your N-methylhistamine into this compound, which is also a feedback inhibitor to HNMT.
Yeah.
So this whole nonsense of over-methylation and under-methylation and using histamine as a biomarker to evaluate that is total
BS. I couldn't agree more. I came to that conclusion about 10 years ago. It just didn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, if you're trying to make sense out of something and you're really trying to force a square hole or a square peg in a round hole, it's time to move on. And I tried doing that with other experts who were doing this whole genetic testing before me. And I was studying their work and I was impressed by their stuff. It looked all really good. But as soon as I tried to explain it and work on it with patients, I just had all these questions and it didn't make any sense. And I kept trying to think, well, am I stupid? And then at the end of the day, I just said, oh, I think they're just wrong. So just because something is published on a pretty PDF and they're up on, or the person is up on stage or they're famous on the internet, does not mean that they're right.
Yeah.
So keep your skeptic hat on, not a skeptic hat, but you're just be open-minded and thinking that you are actually right and they're wrong, and inform them about that in a professional way. Sometimes they are going to be too arrogant to fix it, but sometimes they'll be appreciative. Another thing I actually want to inform you about here, this HRH1, the histamine receptors, these are new for Strategene, and they're very, very important. I actually have an HRH1 genetic variation. So my histamine receptor in my brain is very, very sensitive to histamine. And if you have this particular genetic variant, your motion sickness is pretty high. And I'm also wondering if it has to do with EMF sensitivity, because I am very, very EMF sensitive. So it's interesting. It's an interesting SNP.
But I wonder if, do you think maybe yeast and mold have an influence on that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
we have such terrible mold here in Australia, and we've just had, I don't know if you know, but we had horrific floods that pretty well wiped out the whole of the eastern seaboard.
oh my.
And I think we're going to have, for the next sort of 3 to 10 years, we're going to have the most terrible mold problems.
Oh, that's not good.
Um, and I've got to say, I know we're running out of time, but I'd love you to just show the glutathione pathway, because I think there's been huge improvements of that, being able to see the nitric oxide and superoxide. I really find this a very helpful pathway in talking to my patients about inflammation and how it's affecting particularly nitric oxide, superoxide.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love the glutathione pathway too, because again, because it's actually really simple. Here's the production of glutathione, this route. So this whole thing up here is the production. Here's the reactive oxygen species, synthesis and metabolism, elimination. So, and then here's the recycling. Here's the utilization of your glutathione and the recycling of it down here. Here's the exporting it, and here's another lab marker that you have for your patients, GDT, which you should be working on damn near all of them. So that is a very, very useful marker. So your body actually exports glutathione out of the cell, and then in this particular gene breaks it down, it consumes it, and it processes it back into glutamate, cysteine, and glycine, in order to resynthesize it again. But if your body exports the glutathione, and the glutathione levels drop to a certain amount, then that cell will go through apoptosis or apoptosis, whatever you want to call it, and it'll die. So if you see elevated GGT in your patient, there's something going on, right? So your support their liver, but this individual has a faster GGT. So it's great, we don't know how much, but and here serum GGT has been found to increase significantly in some women after menopause, which is interesting. Unfortunately, Ancestry does not test this particular variant here. This particular gene is a significant find, but it's not there. But just I want to let you know that it exists. So there's a pretty common variant, I forget how common, in GCLC, that reduces the ability to synthesize gamma-glutamylcysteine from cysteine, and it's slow by about 50%. So it's a 50% reduction in enzymatic function. And so, as Carol was talking about, mold and infections are going to be problematic in Australia if you have a genetic variation in GCLC on top of mold exposure. That's an issue, and it's especially an issue if you're just supplementing your patient with N-acetylcysteine. A lot of health practitioners are adamant about saving money for their patients, and I get that, I respect that. But there are times when you need to use the more potent form. So if N-acetylcysteine can raise glutathione, research is showing it is very, very effective. But what they fail to do is provide research on when N-acetylcysteine does not raise glutathione levels in certain individuals, and it doesn't. So if you have an individual who is deficient in magnesium or glycine, then their ability to convert N-acetylcysteine into glutathione is going to be low. Glycine is used up everywhere. Magnesium is used up everywhere. ATP they have, but they're going to be dead if they don't have it. If they have infections or mold or arsenic or lots of oxidative stress, reactive nitrogen species specifically, then their ability to convert N-acetylcysteine to glutathione is reduced. And this is another important point here too. I know we're cutting down on time, but these are all complicated because glutathione metabolism is very complicated. So you just have to click it and read about what's going on in each one and going back.
Yeah, great. All right, fantastic. I think we've got a few questions if you're okay to answer some.
Yeah.
Let me just duck into them. Okay. I bought the Ancestry DNA gene report through the MTHFR Support website last year. Carolyn mentioned some time ago that for those of us, we've already talked about that. Yes, so you can use the Ancestry and you can use 23andMe. Now, how does the Strategene report relate to the reports we have using Sterling's app? Well, it doesn't relate at all. It's a completely different test. So, and will people who have got the Sterling's app need to get a Strategene report as well? Well, I guess it depends on what you need it for and whether or not your practitioner needs more information, because you'll definitely get more information in terms of pathways and being able to see the connections between genes, right, Ben, with the Strategene. So you may well want to use your Ancestry and upload that. One of our practitioners in New Caledonia has asked, can she use the Strategene there? Yes, you can. So again, you just need the to get the Ancestry and then upload it. The only thing I don't know whether Ancestry is available in New Caledonia, because don't they have to be registered in every single country? But I'm not sure that it's available in New Caledonia.
Yeah, I mean, 23andMe will still support you. I mean, you get 11% less variants called, but you know, you're still getting a guide, a map, and all these pathways, and so you're still going to heaps of information to make some good decisions.
And Diane's asking, do you get a discount for those that have already purchased the Strategene before? And you said yes, they do, but they need to contact customer service, right?
Yeah, and I don't know what that is, because we had a discount for people who bought the genetic test itself. But yeah, we will honor a discount. But I haven't talked to the team what that discount will be. But I appreciate your support of the, the being a pioneer of the first strategy. But as you can see, the new strategy is way better.
So maybe if you just ask Danielle to send us that info, we can forward it on to the people
Will do.
that may have purchased it previously.
Yeah.
This is back to the NAC question. In the US, we're suddenly told by the FDA that NAC will no longer be available. Suggestions, please. Well, I'm happy to send NAC to anyone who wants it. And as you quite rightly said, there'll be times that you will want to use NAC. I mean, from a clinical perspective, I really need to use NAC more for neurological support, particularly when I'm wanting to sulfate, serotonin, or when I want to increase PAPs. But for some people, you're going to stick with a glutathione and or a combination of both. So I don't know the rules in the US. If someone orders it off another website and it just comes in for individual use, is that going to be allowed for those that need to take the NAC?
Well, I just did a podcast on this. We'll be releasing it next week on the Dirty Genes podcast. But just because Amazon has pulled it from the US market does not mean that all companies are pulling it. There's a lot of supplement companies that are continue offering it. So
it's only Amazon.
Yeah, at this point. Well, I mean, there's going to be some other ones too, but our manufacturers, we've contacted them and say, are you still supplying N-acetylcysteine? Because, the Council for Responsible Nutrition is fighting the FDA on this.
And so they should.
Yeah, and it's nonsense. It's total nonsense. NAC was classified as a drug, in the 60s when it was used as an inhalation. And a supplement is defined as an oral route, specifically swallowing. So, and has the safety record is amazing. And it's been used by hundreds of companies successfully. So I believe that we will win with N-acetylcysteine, and there are many supplement companies, not just Seeking Health, that will continue to operate. We are sold out at the moment because last weekend was ridiculous.
Yes.
I mean, thousands of bottles gone in literally a weekend. But August we'll have it back. But just check your favorite supplement companies, and they should, ask them.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're fighting it, because it's completely ludicrous.
Yes.
This is from Sonia. I was wondering if there's any research into genetic SNPs, enzyme expression, or specific biochemical pathways that could be involved for people with pathological demand avoidance condition. So that's actually it's associated with autism, and it's when there's violent outbursts and tantrums. And I would say absolutely, because you can look at your COMT, you can look at, obviously you're going to do your patient history, but in MTHFR is associated with autism, COMT, even all the glutathione pathways, histamine. I think it's all relevant.
It's all very relevant. And it's, here's the other thing with that is any type of neurological condition that you are experiencing in your patients, strategy is a must. And it's a must because neurotransmission, you have to know how the neurotransmitters are formed, transported, bound to receptors, activated, reabsorbed, how the cofactor of biopterin is synthesized for all these neurotransmitters, how the glutathione levels are being produced and recycled and utilized, because without sufficient glutathione, there's not enough biopterin, and if your biopterin levels are low, neurotransmission is a mess. And if your nitric oxide synthase gene is not working, then your biopterin's a mess. If your homocysteine is a mess because of your methylation cycle, then then your biopterin's a mess, and so your neurotransmitters. So they're all interacting, and it's if you're trying to find a genetic variant for a specific condition, they might be out there, but the fact of the matter is usually they're very rare. It's like less than 1% of the population will have that particular genetic variant. Autism is on the rise. It's affecting millions of people, not just kids. And I believe that many of us are somewhere on the spectrum, myself included. And it's if you know how your neurotransmitters are working, then you can work to optimize their function. And if you find out where those sticking points are in either the production, the elimination, the reabsorption, what have you, then you can work on those areas. And you're like, oh, I'm starting to get all irritable right now. Okay, for me, it's a slow MAO-A. My COMT is fast. It's true. I have a fast COMT, but my MAO-A is slow. And I'm a male, so it's even slower because it's X-linked. And so I'm going to go take some riboflavin, or maybe I'm going to hit up some lithium. So you need to know. And so when you have these autistic kids and you look at their dopamine pathway, their serotonin pathway, and you look at where their hiccups are, you're like, okay, when this kid has an outburst, it's lithium time. Yeah. Or, and we just had a kid, visiting last weekend. I haven't done genetics, but he took a long time to calm down after being irritated. And I asked the parents, I said, can I give your kid some lithium? And he's a good buddy of mine. And I did, and the kid calmed right down. So
yeah, that's so good. Yeah. Angela's asking, are you saying Australians must use 23andMe and not the Strategene chip? Correct. 23andMe or Ancestry raw data. What about the SNPs 23andMe doesn't test for? Well, then they're not going to show up on the report.
No. And this webinar was delayed for what, 6 months or so?
A year. I looked at it was this time last year we were meant to have it March.
Yeah, and so the amount of legal review is insane. And we have, I don't even know how many lawyers we have on the Seeking Health team. A lot. So it requires a big team, and when we don't have it, we have 40 plus people working at Seeking Health plus contractors, but we do not have the team for regulatory and getting overseas at this moment. I want to, but it's not there. So this is the best that we can do at the moment.
And people can't, even though you're not, say, shipping it to Australia and selling it from here, regulatory wise, people couldn't just order it for their own use and send it back. It has to be registered in Australia, does it?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Because we have a lot of a lot of different things that come into the country that may not necessarily be allowed, but if it's for personal individual use, it's allowed. So
Interesting.
I just wonder whether, because I agree, I mean, you would prefer to do the whole test. That means that you can get the upgrades, you can get whatever comes in the future. You're not missing out on key SNPs, because Emily says, hello, Dr. Ben, I have an old 23andMe report and it's missing the MAO A SNP. Should I start over and get a new saliva swab and report done, or is it not essential? If yes, should I stick with 23andMe or go with another provider? So I'm assuming Emily is in Australia, in which case she's not going to be able to do the full swab.
No, no, and I remember when 23andMe pulled MAO-A, that really pissed me off, and
Yeah.
and they pulled a lot actually, and I did not want to make our own genetic chip. It cost me well over $1 million in just programming fees and research and lawyers, and it's not even including the cost of the chip itself. Just the production of it was a lot of money. So we are not profitable on this at the moment, but that's okay, because we are here to provide a tool for people to use. And I just want to let you know that we created Strategene because I was pissed off at 23andMe, and here we are. I'm working with my amazing team of researchers, Dr. Claire Green and Nikki and Angela and Christian and Elisma, and they're finding these cool functional variants, and we check the raw data of 23andMe ancestry, not found. But it's an amazing SNP, not found. And then we go to Illumina, not found. We're like, come on, people. So now we have to make our own chip.
Right.
So
yeah. Emily, I would say if you're in the US and you have the option to buy the Strategene, perhaps you're not getting better and your health hasn't improved the way it should, then it would be a good idea to get it. So I guess, I mean, I would like to suss out whether or not it's okay to bring it in for own personal use. I think I'd certainly like to do that.
Yeah, the thing is too is let's say you order Strategene and you find a genetic testing laboratory in your area to have them process it, right? So they take your sample and they process it. You have to have the chip. So
couldn't we just send it back to you?
I don't know. You're in an area of domain that I don't know, and I have to be careful what I say as well.
Yeah, I know, I know.
So because in order to read the saliva and pull the DNA from the saliva, you have to have the chip. And I will tell you, since this webinar was delayed a year, the production of going to production with our chip, actually taking customer samples, was delayed by about a year and probably half, just because I had no idea how hard it was. And you all should hear this point. I had no idea how hard it was to validate and accurately call samples, and then how you store that information without getting hacked.
Yeah. Okay.
So all this stuff was done very well by Seeking Health. But if you're ordering a genetic test from a non-23andMe, non-Ancestry, maybe a smaller company, I doubt that they have the financial resources to do that. I mean, just to hire a professional hacking firm, which we did, that was over $60,000. And that excludes the programming of fixing it. So we hired professional hackers to penetrate our database to find vulnerabilities. They said, we found these vulnerabilities, fix it. We fixed them. They tried to hack into it again. They couldn't. So this is the type of stuff that is not done by most companies.
So this is that's a good point. Question that I have is that we hear about a lot of these other genetic reports that they're not really validated, and you're getting a lot of false positives, false negatives. Tell us about yours and what you've done to ensure the validity of these SNPs.
Boy, it's a long process, and it's a multi-step process. So first off, let's say I find a SNP that I really want to test. Maybe it's a comp SNP, and it's not V158M. It's something else. It's something that you haven't seen. So we share the SNPs that we want to, the RSID that we want to use. We send it to Illumina, and then they give us a quality score back on the SNPs that we report back. We want, and they say, okay, well, this particular RSID, the quality score is low, and then I say, well, why is that? Well, it's because of the CPGs. Cytosines and guanines in our DNA are very prolific. So that we have lots of cytosines and guanines. So if an RSID, if a genetic variant is located in a particular area of a particular gene with a lot of cytosines and guanines, the reliability to call that particular SNP accurately goes down the toilet very fast. Because what they do is, if you have an RSID in a particular gene, what that is it's code for a specific location of where that SNP is in 1,000 to 10,000 or 20,000, amino acids or whatever nucleotides long. And so, but a genetic testing company will take that RSID. If it's, CONT V158M, the valine shifts to a methionine in that one particular location. And then they have a probe which looks at 50 bases to the left and 50 bases to the right. And that's the probe. But if there's a lot of cytosines, guanines, they say, I can't accurately call that. We cannot confidently reproduce that. A lot of companies will just take that RSID and say, put it on the chip, or they'll just take some random chip. And then the reliability, the quality of that call can vary. It can
I understand that, right?
Yeah, and so if we have a SNP that we really, really want, but the Illumina comes back to us and your quality score is crap, they say, okay, expand the probe to 100 bases to the left and right. Okay, that's better, but it's still crap. So now we say, okay, you read DNA, you can read it from forward to reverse to forward. So you can revert, so we say, okay, call it from both directions. So now on the chip, we have all these different ways to go at this particular variant from multiple different ways, and it's reproduced. We've triplicated it.
Great.
So if we just run if we just run an RSID once, the accuracy is like 80 some %, not very good, right? If you triplicate that SNP, meaning you run it in triplicate and it comes back with the same allele every single time, then the accuracy is well over 90%.
Okay.
So it's very, very important, and this is stuff that is not looked at by a lot of companies. And in fact, I worked with a gentleman in a podcast where he was interviewing me to go over his Strategene report, and he ordered a genetic test from this other pretty well-known company that is out there still, I think. And he was all excited because he didn't have MTHFR. MTHFR is pretty easy to call, actually. He said he was wild type. He ordered Strategene from 23andMe, and we found that he was homozygous.
No way.
677, and he freaked out.
You're
and he
kidding.
was so flustered, he couldn't even do the interview anymore.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So, again, pretty PDFs don't mean anything unless the back end is dialed in.
Someone's asking, we've only got a couple for one or two more questions. Does the new Strategene talk about glyphosate? I don't know if do you have that on there as an environmental epigenetic factor at all?
Let me just go to the PDF and type gly.
I'll ask another question while you're doing that. I have a whole genome report from Dante Labs. Can I use this data to download the Strategene report?
Currently, only 23andMe and Ancestry are used.
Okay.
We are looking to others as well. But I am confident that 23andMe and Ancestry has built their chips well. I'm confident. I'm not confident about these other organizations. That's why we don't offer other ones at the moment.
Okay.
So, if somehow I can know that their chip was built right, then we will do it.
This is a good question. With much research around milk supply for breastfeeding into prolactin, oxytocin, dopamine hormones, etc., is there a pathway, or have you considered creating a pathway report for helping those who may have milk supply struggles?
Yes. So short answer, yes. Longer answer is I love pathways. Pathways are very, very useful as a clinician and health professional, because it gives you, it allows you to have strategic decision making, and that's hence the name Strategene. It gives you strategic, value, tools to use. So yes, milk production somewhat is on Strategene currently. If they have anxiety and stressors, low folates, low phosphatidylcholines, low creatines, due to low methylation, then their milk supply is going to be lower. And also the quality of their milk. So even if their milk supply is decent, the quality of the breast milk that they're actually giving to the baby could be lower. So we think breast milk is best, and it is, but just because there's breast milk coming out of the woman's breast and then in the baby does not mean that it's nutritionally adequate. If a woman has mastitis, recurring mastitis, I wish I'd known this years ago for our boys, my wife's pain, but she got mastitis all the time. And then we did her Strategene, and we found that she has a very slow PEMT pathway and a slow folate pathway. So her ability to synthesize phosphatidylcholine was low. And all I needed to do was give her some phospholipids, and her milk supply would have come through without any mastitis issues and clumping in her breasts, and the baby's brain would have been a lot healthier as well. So highly, highly recommend using phosphatidylcholine during breastfeeding, regardless if they're producing well or not. But Strategene can help you in that way indirectly. Will we make a breastfeeding pathway? I doubt it. But will we talk about it in our pregnancy report? Absolutely.
Maybe is that pregnancy report looking at specific hormones like prolactin, or will it actually look at your production of hormones?
We are going to be looking at estrogens and progesterones and blood flows and all that. But the problem is pregnancy is such a, you can go down 9 million rabbit holes, right? So how many reports around pregnancy will we have? So if it's recurrent miscarriage, that's one thing, but is it recurrent miscarriage due to blood flow and blood clots? Is it recurrent miscarriage due to PCOS and insulin issues and obesity? There's all sorts of things that you can go down the rabbit hole on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So pathways, sub-pathways. I lost, there's another comment I was going to say. Forgot.
All right. I know there's we'll leave it there. There's a lot more questions about how you upload. As soon as we finish this today, you will all receive an email that will tell you how to upload it, what link to click on. There's a lot of other questions about how to upload your data. And it's only 23andMe and Ancestry. So there's a lot of questions about other labs.
It's very easy.
Yeah, it is so easy. I did it last night at 11 o'clock, and it literally took me 2 minutes. It was really, really simple. So that was a really nice process. So Dr. Ben, thank you so much. I know we've kept you over time, but really appreciate you spending that time with us today. I think everybody should be really excited about this new report, and we wish you the best of luck with it.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I look forward to hearing how it's helping you all and helping your patients. And that's what we built it for. So yeah, take
Terrific.
care all.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Bye for now, everybody.